All right.
Do I need to click OK up there?
Is it showing that?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Okay. Welcome. I'm Lita Mae Button, and this is the Dildo Dilemma, Humor in the Face of Trauma podcast. I want you to imagine being paralyzed by fear because each step you've taken forwards up to this point in life was blocked with the obstacles that live inside: doubt, insecurities, feelings of abandonment. And that was me from the age of 16 to 22. Then, bam, life sucker punched me. I became a single parent to my son with a lifelong and at times life threatening blood disorder called hemophilia B. I knew that I needed to deal with these obstacles to be strong and help him grow into a productive and well adjusted adult. I began boxing competitively through one punch, one competition, and overcoming one fear at a time. I did it. I learned how to punch back at life, absorbing the shock of life's blows and channeling those blows into empowering myself and tackling those fears in the ring rippled out into my everyday life, giving me the confidence to live life on my own terms and be the number one role model for my son, and if the need should arise, protect us. And it's why I'm a motivational speaker and coach and do what I do, because I know the end result when you are empowered on every level of your being, especially being a woman. When a woman takes back her power and steps into her power from the inside out, it has a rippling effect onto the world that it needs to heal, especially in this day and age. When a woman empowers herself first and foremost, she shows and nurtures onto and into others what is possible, which teaches us how to treat each other with love, kindness, and compassion. And the world needs this more than ever, especially when it comes to ending violence against women. So you're watching and joining us today. That's why I'm doing the weekly podcast and have started the movement called Dildo Dilemma, Humor in the Face of Trauma, which is about bringing awareness, advocacy, and action to help eliminate violence against women in Newfoundland and worldwide. And in case you're wondering why Newfoundland, well, two reasons. First, it's my home and it's my family's home. And I recently found out that violence against women statistically in Newfoundland is a little bit higher than the rest of Canada. One in two women over the age of 15 will experience a form of stalking or violence in their lifetime. And I want to help make a lasting change for my family now and for my grandkids that will be born in the future. And I know that those changes first have to focus on what's happening inside and closest to me. Second, Newfoundland is just plain awesome. It's Canada's most eastern province. There's an island of just over 500,000 people with its own time zone and the name of towns like Blow Me Down and Dildo. However, an imposter in 2019 by the name of Jimmy Kimmel has claimed himself as the mayor, honorary mayor of our town of Dildo, yet not once has he visited Dildo or even stepped onto the island of Newfoundland. And now I just found out some other dude by the name of Jerry D, also a Canadian, who's also not a Newfoundlander, is trying to take a run for the mayorship of Dildo. And I even found out that he's not even planning on visiting Newfoundland in his upcoming comedy tour dates in the next following months. So I really think it's time to put a woman in charge to advocate for Newfoundland. We can just say this is a real dildo dilemma. So it's time for a woman to lead and help make changes by nurturing instead of demanding. Hashtag Lita Mae Button, hashtag Mayor of Dildo, hashtag nurturing leadership, hashtag dildo dilemma, time for change. So, welcome to today's guest, Lynn Moore. Thank you so much, Lynn, for joining us here today.
You're very
Would you
welcome.
please let us know what your background is and why you said yes to coming on to this podcast?
So I'm a lawyer, and I began my legal career with the Crown Attorney's Office, and I was helping some senior Crown attorneys, both of whom were women, Kathy Knox and Kathleen Healy, who were prosecuting the Christian Brothers. And the Christian Brothers who had been at Mount Cashel. And so these were very traumatic trials to bear witness to, which, of course, is minuscule compared to the trauma that the boys who were in Mount Cashel went through. And as I watched those cases, I decided that I wanted to be a voice for victims of male violence. And I began work as a Crown prosecutor as soon as I was called to the bar in 1993. And then I did that work for almost 20 years. And in 2013, I left and went into private practice, where I almost exclusively represent people who've been sexually assaulted as children. And I view all of my work to be anti-violence work.
You. So you said that you were a Crown attorney, prosecutor at first. And so the way that your career has kind of unfolded, it just kind of led you in that direction. It's not something that you specifically kind of set out to do.
No, I didn't. I mean, I knew that I always wanted to do criminal law when I was a child. And then when I went to law school, I thought that I would be a defense lawyer. But I was lucky enough to get a job with the Crown Attorney's Office and saw how the criminal justice system treats victims, which is not very kindly, and it can be very aggressive and re-traumatizing for survivors of violence. And I decided that I wanted to help those survivors. I wanted to help shepherd them through the criminal justice system. And I wanted to be the one objecting to cross-examinations that I thought were abusive or uncalled for. And after doing that for quite a long time, I was a bit run down by how difficult a process that was. I began to feel like I was a cog in a very unfair wheel. So I left the government and went into private practice, and I represent survivors now of childhood sexual assault, mostly, although some adult sexual assaults as well. And I represent them in suing. So it's taking it out of the criminal process and bringing it into the civil process, which I find is much more survivor friendly. The survivor is the person who is deciding whether or not to proceed and deciding all the major points. Just like any solicitor-client relationship, the client makes the decisions. The lawyer gives the advice, the client makes the decisions. In the criminal justice system, the Crown attorney has to, by law, make a lot of decisions, and sometimes those decisions are in conflict with what the victim wants. So, for instance, in a situation of spousal assault, where a woman has been assaulted by her husband or boyfriend or intimate partner, oftentimes women will approach the Crown prosecutor and say, I don't want this to proceed. And the Crown prosecutor may say, well, I have to consider the public interest. I am a lawyer for the public, and I believe this is a very serious issue and a very serious problem. And I'm sorry that you don't want to proceed, but I feel it is my duty as an officer of the court whose job is to help protect the public to proceed with this case, even though it's not what you want. So that was a very difficult situation to be in for someone who wanted to help survivors and victims of violence, to find myself frequently telling women, I'm sorry, I know you don't want the case to go ahead, but I am going ahead anyway. And if it helps, I will tell the assailant's lawyer that you've asked to have the charge dropped, and it's me. I'm the one who said, no, it's not on you. When you're making these decisions as a Crown attorney, you have to take into account the fact that you don't know why this question is being asked. It may be that the man has threatened her and told her that if she doesn't get the charges dropped or try to get the charges dropped, that he'll kill her. And you don't know. At the time when I was prosecuting, we were told that by the time someone goes to the police, by the time a woman reports to the police, there has usually been 30 prior incidents of assault. So the prosecutors viewed all the women coming forward as people who were really at risk of dying from this assault because it is so rare for women to complain.
Wow. And so this is that 30 prior incidents of assault before they actually begin to come forwards and file a charge. How did they find this out? Like, so was this something that's like kept in records and files that they've kind of statistically put over a certain amount of time? Like, I'm just curious where that actual number comes from.
Well, this is what we were told in the early 90s. So this was social sciences research at the time was saying that on average, by the time a woman reports to the police, there have been 30 prior incidents of assault.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yes, it is a lot. And there's a lot of reasons, a lot of really valid reasons why women don't come forward. One is that that really increases their risk of death
Yeah.
if they come forward. Another is that they have a complicated relationship with the offender, one that's not all negative, and they may have children together, they have economic interests together. And another one is that many women just do not have faith in the system, that it will hear their complaints respectfully and that it will treat them with respect, or that they will get any sense of justice out of participating in that system.
That's yeah. And so from your personal perspective and working in the system, what like I know there's so many different layers to it, but what would your professional opinion be on why the system doesn't support women when they come forwards?
Well, my view is that the women, the system protects men's liberty over women's safety.
Okay.
And that the system is, there's a saying that it's better that 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person go to prison. And the reason behind that statement is that we want people to have faith in the system, that innocent people don't go to jail. But the other side of that coin is that guilty people also don't go to jail. Um, and uh, and then you get into the whole question of whether or not jail is really an effective response for behavior. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it is not. In fact, I believe the social sciences on the factors that are likely to increase violence are shame, isolation, and more violence, which is
Yeah.
exactly what happens when you put someone in prison. You shame them, you isolate them, and you subject them to more violence. So I'm not sure that I don't think that's a very popular opinion to hold, that jail is not the answer. I think most people feel on a visceral level that punishment is important, but I really question the value of sending people to jail. I recognize that there are some people that are very, very evil and they cannot be reformed or rehabilitated, but I believe that's a very small number of the population. And one of the last things I did as a Crown attorney was work in the Family Violence Intervention Court,
Okay.
which was a really amazing experience. There was a real wraparound of support for the victim and the offender. And the offender had to go through counseling. They had to admit their guilt at the beginning, and then they go through counseling. And over an 8 to 10 month period, they made return trips to court. And at the end of the process, because they had undertaken this counseling and these extra trips to court to report in on how they were doing, because they had made all these efforts, then the court then gave them a discount on sentence or lowered their sentence because they had taken concrete steps towards reformation and rehabilitation. And the men that went through that court were saying things to the judge at the end, like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever been through. I understand so much better now. And it was a really valuable process to be a part of.
Yes. So the and the communication and relationships that we're families that went through that process then was much more healing and effective. And the what's the exact word for it? Revivism, I think.
Recidivism, yeah.
Yeah, is a lot less likely than when you're saying when the healing and the counseling and the collaboration with families to understand and come together through mediation and counseling is a lot more effective than prison time.
Yes, much more. The recidivism rate was lower for people who went through that court. They kept stats on it, and I believe this was 2013 that I did it, but I believe at the time there was 25% less recidivists who went through the court as opposed to those that didn't. And the thing to remember about violence, male violence on women, is that it's often wrapped up in other things like their own childhood trauma or their addictions, and their inability to um, problem solve without resorting to violence. I believe that male violence towards women is a learned behavior. A lot of men who assault their intimate partners were raised in homes where that happened, and a lot of women who are assaulted by their intimate partners were raised in homes where that happened between their parents. So it is a process that can be unlearned.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think that we start the process of unlearning by sending people to prison, especially in Newfoundland, a prison that has mold growing on the walls and is rat infested and was built in the 1800s.
Thank you for sharing your professional insights, Lynn. I'm just going to take a brief little couple minute educational break here to talk about the town of Dildo, a little bit of history about the town of Dildo, and the adult toy. So first, the town of Dildo. It was one of the oldest routes through Dildo is called Anderson's Cove, and as early as 2000 BC, the maritime archaic Aboriginal people lived in this cove, which I really found very, very interesting how deep our history goes here in Newfoundland. Now, if you've ever watched the movie Hysteria, it is based on the real life story of the 19th century first mechanical vibrators that was invented by a doctor for the treatment of a women's condition called hysteria. This hysteria was believed to, sorry, the device was resembled a medical instrument and was used to treat symptoms like anxiety, irritability, and sexual frustration, which were thought to be symptoms of hysteria. And in a way, this marked the beginning of a more scientific or therapeutic approach to sexual health, even if the real benefits were linked to orgasms. Thought that was interesting. So sometimes Hollywood seems like it's Hollywood, but it's actually based on real life information. So, in your opinion, Lynn, how do you think the system could better support people who've experienced violence?
Well, I definitely think that the province and the country really need to consider alternative forms of resolutions aside from the criminal justice system. One other thing about the criminal justice system, I think I read in the Globe and Mail the other day that 168 cases of sexual violence had been dismissed because of the Jordan ruling, which says that trials have to take place within 2.5 years after the charge has been laid, and the justice system has just not been able to cope with these deadlines that were set by the Supreme Court of Canada. So charges are just being dismissed without ever having been tried on their merits. The other thing about the system is that it is, I think, safe to say, re-traumatizing for survivors, They go into a courtroom and they are cross-examined, and that cross-examination can sometimes be quite rude, or worse than rude at times. And essentially, the defense lawyer is suggesting that their evidence is not worthy of belief, and that they may have a motive to lie, or that they're not being truthful. And when I was a prosecutor, I have had some survivors say to me that the trial was worse than the assault, which is a devastating thing to say, when someone who is, being physically or sexually abused, and they call the police for help, and then at the end of that process they say, "Oh, actually, no, the assault was better." That means that, we really have to take a hard look at how we're doing criminal justice. And I think that we have it all wrong, and that we need to have a process more like the processes that they use in Norway, where people who are separated from society are done so in a humane fashion, where they have a lot of resources thrown at them, and they have a lot of availability for resources before it gets to the stage where they need to go to prison. But their prisons are very different than our prisons. They look more like hotels. They're places where people stay and get support and help they need, so that they can change their behavior. So I think we need to look at the system in a whole new way, and we need to not have victims cross-examined for lengthy periods of time, and have suggestions made to them that they're not believable. That does not help women, and it does not help the prevention of crime. So I think we need to look at a completely different way of responding to this type of crime.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Um, I know in your previous interview in 2022 with the feminist activism Newfoundland, you mentioned the Journey Project. Would you be able to explain exactly what that means?
So the Journey Project is a government-funded agency that assists survivors of, originally it was survivors of sexual violence, and now it's been expanded to include sexual violence and intimate partner violence. And they are just an amazing organization. They do great work. They have a great group of people working there. I work closely with them, and I can't say enough good things about them. They provide support to people who have been victimized, and who are trying to figure out what path they want to take. Do they want to make a complaint to the police? There's also a process that they are an important part of, called third-party reporting. So
Okay.
with third-party reporting, if, say, Jane Smith is sexually assaulted and she's not sure if she wants to go to the police, well, Jane Smith can go to the Journey Project, tell them what happened. They'll take a statement from her, and then they'll send that statement to the police, but they will take out her identifying information. So the police will have an account of a sexual assault and they'll have the name of the perpetrator, they'll have all the details, and then if somebody else complains about that same person,
Right.
then the police will contact the Journey Project and say, "Remember Jane Smith? She
Yeah.
gave you this statement. Well, now we have another complaint, and we would like to know if Jane would now like to come to the police and talk to us about it." And it gives women more power about what happens to them, because once you go to the police and you make a statement about what's happened to you, then the police do their investigation. They don't drop it if you say drop it,
Yeah.
necessarily. They do their investigation. And then, as I was talking about earlier, if you tell the Crown Attorney you don't want to proceed, the Crown Attorney won't necessarily do what you want to do. And in fact, there was a sexual assault trial in 2013, 2014, where an Indigenous woman was brought to court in handcuffs because she did not appear when she was supposed to appear pursuant to her subpoena. So she was arrested and brought to court in handcuffs for a trial of a serial rapist for whom she had very good reason to be afraid of. And so that's, the really negative side of the justice system. So the third party reporting and the Journey Project, they give more power to women to make their choice about, when they're going to report, if they're going to report, if they're going to have an accounting kept there. And for people who do want to report, the Journey Project will send one of their amazing workers to go with them to the police station to be a support person for them. And they will hook them up with lawyers who can provide them with advice about what the criminal justice system looks like, or what the civil justice system looks like, or what it looks like to complain to your boss if you're being sexually harassed. So
Yeah,
it's this wonderful resource, and they do really amazing work.
that definitely sounds like it. So they are Newfoundland based, Newfoundland and Labrador based then.
They are.
Okay. Okay, amazing. So I know that your time is precious and that you've got to run here. Lynn, I just want one more question for you here before we wrap up. What legal advice that can you give to women who've experienced violence and are advocating for themselves when dealing with the Newfoundland police and legal system?
Well, I would strongly encourage anyone who is thinking about going to the police to contact the Journey Project and to avail of the legal services that are available to you, because there is just so much about the criminal justice system that the average person does not know about. Like, for instance, I'm not sure if most people know that if you make a complaint to the police, the person that you're complaining about will eventually end up with a photocopy of your statement.
Yes, I knew that.
and many people don't know that. So just if you have the opportunity to speak with a lawyer before you give a statement and you tell them that, then you can say, it's important to be precise in your language, because especially if you're talking about, so, well, it's important to be precise in your language anyway, but if you are talking about a something that happened repeatedly over a long period of time, you don't want to say it happened all the time. You want to say it happened about once or twice a week, because you want to be precise in your language. If you use words that are like always, or, forever, or whatever, words like that, it just gives the defense lawyer opportunity to cross-examine you. Well, it didn't actually happen every day, did it? That kind of thing.
So that brings me back to my point on a couple podcasts ago, I was saying about documentation, because I've been through that myself, like where it's important to document all the steps or all the things that have gone on. Is that just as important, and how much does that count when bringing into like when you actually go to court, and that like does that help represent the precise language?
Well, if we're talking about someone who's like repeatedly calling you or
Yes.
repeatedly showing up outside your house, then documenting can be very, very important. But if
Yeah.
we're talking about your diary, when you're writing things, the difficulty with that kind of documentation is that you then have to hand it over. And there may be a number of entries in there that have nothing to do with the crime, but you have to hand the diary over. So, yes, if we're looking at a situation where there's a repeated series of events that are happening and that they're happening over and over again, you're never going to remember the number of them. It's very good to say, phone call this time, phone call that time. Saw him outside my house this day, saw him outside my house that day. That's very, very important. But if you're telling the whole story of what happened, it's better to do that with someone who's trained to take statements.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so we're gonna add a little bit of humor before we wrap up here in the next couple minutes, with a little bit of dildo jokes. So, why don't dildos ever tell secrets?
No idea.
They can't hold anything in. How do dildos greet each other at a party?
Again, no idea.
Hey, long time no see. Let's get this party going. So, thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. And thank you again, Lynn, for your time here and giving us your professional advice and insights. I just want to remind everybody that this March 1st in St. John's at the Lantern from 12 to 4 p.m., I'll be hosting an all women's beginning boxing seminar. So, ladies, come on out to protect yourself, learn how to protect yourself at all times, stand your ground, and have lightning-like focus. So thank you again, Lynn, for your time. And I hope everybody has an amazing weekend.
Thank you so much.